Welcome to Elijah Streams. I'm your host, Steve Schultz. Recently, Elijah Streams attended the Compassion to Action regional event in Portland, Oregon. We were able to meet up with one of the most well-respected and sought-after leaders in many current-day church movements, and he's especially known for the spirit of wisdom he possesses. I know you'll enjoy this power-packed episode with Senior Pastor of Bethel Church in Redding, California, Pastor Bill Johnson. Bill Johnson?
I do. Thanks.
I don't think you need an introduction.
Okay, thank you.
For those that may think they need an introduction, they're going to get one by the words that come out of your mouth. I just want to say, hopefully without unduly buttering you up, I just don't think I've known anyone who, when you speak, there's just this wisdom comes forth. I just felt like, in fact, this is on my notes, but I wanted to ask you, Bill, have you spent a lot of time over the years praying for wisdom, or did you just discover over the years that God gifted it you and it just keeps kind of like, what would you say about that?
Yeah, wisdom is a huge deal to me. I remember, I wasn't a real spiritual kid, you know. I had a great reverence for God, but I didn't have this passion or hunger. But I remember talking to a friend one day. I said, hey, if you could have anything in the world, what would you want? We were like 12 years old.
Wow.
And he said something, I forget what it was. And I said, I'd choose wisdom. And it wasn't out of spirituality. It was because I had heard a story about Solomon. I thought, you know, it worked for him. It's probably a good choice.
But you see, even in the fun and
yeah, exactly.
God was already doing it. Something stuck in your mind.
It marked me.
And you wanted it.
Yeah.
I've spent, the reason probably why I wanted to ask you that, I've spent hours over the years praying for wisdom. And when it comes up, and I know that when someone will come up and they'll say, hey, Bill, could you help me with this solution? Doesn't it feel good to just, it's like present. It just comes out, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You don't even know what you're going to say sometimes.
Yeah. You know, when Solomon prayed for wisdom, the actual language is he asked for a hearing ear.
Oh.
And the Lord says, you have what you request. I give you wisdom. So that tells us two sides of the same coin. The hearing ear is the key to wisdom.
Oh, I like that. I had not heard that before. That's
so
really
he had asked for that ability to discern and to hear. And so
that's really
it.
interesting.
That's why we may not know ahead of time, but we know in the moment.
There's a story, and I asked you off the camera if you would tell this. You were looking for power. For those that may not know, Bill's president, CEO, pastor, senior, what leader, however you describe it, Redding Church, Bethel at Redding. And that movement's literally gone all over the world. But there was a time when there wasn't much power. Is that right? And you went after it. So, and you ended up at the vineyard down there in Anaheim. Tell that story.
Yeah, I've been at Bethel now for 22 years. But previous to that, about 7 years earlier, we had been praying for the sick, teaching on it, doing all that I knew to do, and nothing was happening. We didn't see anything happen. And I heard about this place in Anaheim, the vineyard, that Wimber and those guys were having breakthroughs. So I took about 6 or 7, 8 of our leaders. We drove down there and sat there for 4 or 5 days, however long the event was, and really was impacted. But inside of me, I was a little bit frustrated because I wanted to learn new things, and I was actually hearing things I'd already taught. And by the end of it, I realized the missing element for me, at least in that particular area, was that they lived with risk, and I didn't. You know, I realized I had the theology, they had the experience that backed the theology.
And by risk, well, let's let you define it. What do you mean? Give me an example.
You have to look for problems. You have to look for problems.
You're looking for problems.
Yeah, you can't just say, God, I want to see the sick healed, and not look for the sick.
No,
you've got to look for occasions. He's the extravagant one. What we do in prayer is we open up the opportunity for the extravagant one to invade, do what he does. And so you have to kind of create room in a sense. If you're pastoring and you're leading a meeting, it just means you create time in the meeting. It means you look for people maybe before the service starts. You look for people that are limping when they walk in, or whatever it might be. If you're a pastor and it's a small church, you know more intimately the condition, the physical condition of people, and so you just consistently pray for that same person.
So instead of just being the pastor or saying, "Hey, you go over there," you're taking a personal.
Yeah.
You're doing. I've seen some of the people. A lot of them come from your church or your Bethel, but I mean they're going around. And I don't know that Todd White does. He's not from Bethel, I don't think, or was he at Bethel?
No, he's not. But we've been
But-
closely related
Yes,
since he was
and that's
saved.
probably why
Yeah.
I'm seeing that. But I mean, I watched some video of him going into Jerusalem, and I watched this the other day. He went to Jerusalem and ministered to these soldiers. And one had a little beard. And they're at one of the gates of Jerusalem.
Yep.
Can't remember what gate that was. You might, if you heard that. But he's
saw the video, yeah.
ministering to him. And then they left. And 3 weeks later, he just got the guy's back healed. He's a soldier. He's got this machine gun trained on Todd in case he's a terrorist, because he doesn't look like normal. And so the guy, you could see, smiled and appreciated it. And he said, "This is in the name of Yeshua." He said, "This is in the name of Jesus." He walked off, and 3 weeks later, he finds out that after that event, it wasn't clear if it was the same day or soon, a terrorist came through and mowed down 2 soldiers, one of which was that soldier.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if it's the same day. I couldn't tell.
I think it was within 24 hours, if I remember the
really
story right.
short.
It
And I
was
thought,
very,
oh,
yeah,
girl,
crazy,
do you
crazy.
realize if he hadn't stopped,
Yeah.
you know, that it's possible that he changed his eternal, we don't know those things, but even to have shared the love of Christ right before.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to step beyond what's comfortable. That's the whole point.
And that's risk. And he's, instead of walking through the gate and saying, waving respectfully to Israeli soldiers, he says, does one of you have you have this in your back? And he did.
Yeah.
That's where I have the trouble
Yeah.
obeying or risking, because I'll go to my own restaurants that I go to. I don't really want to engage the waitress every time, but I know people that want to engage the waitress every time.
Yeah. I'm not that forward, but I will look for opportunities, you know, especially if you have a word of knowledge or some kind of an inkling that this is what God has wanted to do, then you've got to find, you know, that individual. But it doesn't mean you have to pray for everyone you walk past.
When you came back from the vineyard and realized somewhere in that process that you forgot the risk element, how did you change? How did that?
You know, we were praying for people before, so that continued. I'll tell you something else I don't always mention, but they never laid hands on us for impartation. There was never any of those kinds of things in the event. You were there, so
yes,
you remember.
I was at that one.
They never did any of that. Didn't teach on it. But something got on us. When we got back, it actually started that weekend.
Really?
Yeah, it did, immediately. And it was, to be totally honest, it was a lot easier to take the risk once you see him invade. So then, from there, you know, somebody stopped me on the street and I could sense this. I'd talk to them and pray with them, and God would touch them powerfully, and I'd find out they're a relative in the hospital, so I'd run down there and pray for them. And it was that kind of thing. You're kind of in this momentum, and you're looking for a chance to express it, you know. It's a lot easier to talk when you have something to say, and when you sense the momentum of God in a particular area, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out. You just cooperate.
Yeah, because I think all of us who maybe didn't just go to that conference, that was 87, I'm thinking.
Yeah, 87.
And that was a pivotal one. I remember, if it's the same one, I think at one point on that conversation, on that convention, we were all on our knees, and it was just a really solemn and yet uplifting. Of course, there were times of wild praise and fun. I wanted to explore a couple things, and we may not get it all in this segment, but when I was listening to you, you really got to me in the sense of that the church has missed it because we've separated sacred from secular. Can you talk on that?
Yeah, well, you know that every believer is a priest unto the Lord. And what's happened in church history is there's been a division in people's thinking. They look at those who preach behind the pulpit, or the missionary in Africa or Latin America or wherever, that they have spiritual jobs, they are sacred. And then the person who repairs cars, or who is the dentist or the stay-at-home mom, those are secular occupations, and that's just not biblical.
It's not in the word, is it?
No, it isn't. And because of that error, it's not just that ministry doesn't happen as much in the public place. It's that people don't receive the encouragement from doing what they're doing because they've been assigned by God. The strength that we have in our call is in the name of the one who called us. It's not in the title. And if I only get my strength, my encouragement from pastor or author or whatever, fill in the blanks, if that's where I receive my encouragement, my identity, then I've missed it. My identity is in the name of the one who called me. And so if he's called me to be, a teacher of the word, stand behind the pulpit, do what I do, or he's called me to be a dentist, the call is a call.
And the call, okay, I'm just going to then take that further. So whether you're the full-time Bill Johnson, running Bethel and all the things that you do, and all the itinerant, or you're a stay-at-home mom with 3 kids and you never get out and there's not enough money and you're a believing stay-at-home mom, is the call the same?
Yeah, absolutely.
How does the woman who stays at home get over those self-condemnation thoughts that look what they're doing? And
She has to think different because it's wrong thinking. She's raising world changers.
She is. Okay.
Someone's got to raise a Billy Graham.
Yeah, that's true.
Somebody's got to do that. And so when you, in fact, I just wrote a book, comes out a few months, called Raising Giant Killers. It's raising with eternal purpose. Yeah. And that's the whole deal. Is